In this tutorial, we will be going over the process of using your CNC in conjunction with your laser to create a customizable photo plaque. We will start with a set of pre-made vectors and walk through creating the laser toolpath for the photo that will be engraved or etched on the plaque. Then we will develop the Moulding Toolpath and VCarving toolpaths that will be used to cut the rest of this project. Here for this demo, we're going to open up a pre-made file. So we can go to open an existing file. And when you installed this tutorial, you should have got a file called photoplaque.crv. So we'll select that and we'll click open. Now right away in the 2D view, you'll see we have some vectors on different layers. First of all, let's have a look at our actual job setup. So this is a single-sided job. The width is 10, the height is 7, the thickness is going to be 0.5 of an inch, and of course we're using inches as our units. We're going to be zeroing off our material surface. Our datum will be set to the bottom left, and then we are using a very high resolution, and we're using Canadian maple as our appearance. So we'll click OK. Let's have a look at our layers. You'll see that we have 3 different layers here, and you can access these here as well through this drop-down. We have one called molding vectors, and those are the vectors that we're going to use to create a molding toolpath around the outside of our plaque. We have some text on its own layer as well, and it's just set up as sort of templated text so that you can go in and you can change the first and last name if you'd like, and also the month and day and the year of the birth of the little baby. And that's what this is going to be in the end, is a baby plaque. And then we have a vector in the middle, which is on the orange layer, which is a circle. And that's what we're going to use to crop the bitmap down to. Let's go back to our drawing tab for a moment. And let's have a quick look at the toolpath strategy that we're going to use to etch in the face of the baby in the center of our plaque. So let's flip over to our toolpaths tab. And we have the 2 laser strategies here that were installed with our module, our laser module. The first one here is the laser cut and fill. Now we're not going to go into that any at all in this video. There's another great video about making a construction square or the V-square that'll walk you through that. For this particular video, we're going to look at the laser picture. So we'll click that. This is our laser picture form. And of course, we're just going to breeze over this right quick. But on the top of this form, we can choose the settings that we'd like to use for our laser from our tool database if we'd like to, or we can modify them on the fly if we'd like to do that as well, temporarily for this toolpath. We have 3 different strategies that we can use. We can use a raster, hatch, or selected vectors. We can choose to dither either the raster or the hatch version of our image. And we have some settings down here that we can choose. Of course, we have our safe Z position here that is set when we did our material setup. We can change the name of our toolpath if we'd like to. And we can also project the toolpath onto the 3D model. We're not going to get into that in this video, but we will in another video. If we'd like to save off our toolpath from right inside of this form, we can use that by choosing an appropriate post-processor for that. We can also ask it to amend a front or back name to our toolpath. We can also output directly to our CNC machine if we'd like to, using V-transfer if we have that option. And then we can save our toolpath so we can calculate, and then we can close down this form. Let's just go ahead and close this form down for now. And now we need to bring in a bitmap that we're going to use in the center of our plaque. So let's go over to our drawing tab. So we're going to jump back over to our drawing tab again. And we're going to go up to File, and we're going to choose to import in a bitmap. So click that. It also included with your tutorial is going to be this baby JPEG. So we'll click that and we'll click Open. And that'll be imported in directly into the middle of our job. And it'll be given its own layer to live on here, so we can turn that on and off if we'd like to, but we're going to leave it always on for this particular demonstration. So we'll click outside of that, we'll select that bitmap, we'll click it again so that our sizing handles come up, and if we hold down our Shift key, we can just go ahead and size that photo up. What we're going to try and do is fill in the middle of that orange circle with the baby's face, or at least so we have a nice border around the outside of it here, and we'll just keep doing that. We can use our cursor keys here to kind of nudge it around a bit and size it up a bit more. And that looks fairly good right there. That's great. So now we have this orange circle, this closed vector that we're going to use to crop this bitmap with, because really we only want to laser just the part that's inside of that circle. So to do that, we are going to make sure that we have our bitmap selected, and it is currently selected. If we hold down our Shift key, we can select the circle as well. And then we can use our crop bitmap tool here. We'll just click that, and you'll see that our bitmap is now cropped to that circle. If we select the bitmap, that looks pretty good. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to look at changing the contrast and maybe the brightness of this image so that we can get a better reproduction when we use our laser. So to do that, we are going to use our picture editor. So we'll click that. Now in our picture editor, we've got some really basic editing tools here. We can change the contrast of our image if we would like to. Double click on that little notch there to bring it back to the center. We can change the brightness if we'd like to. We can change the gamma as well if we'd like to. We can invert that bitmap if we want to. We can convert that to a grayscale, or we can add a border to that image. So we can click add border. We can use a rectangular border. That doesn't work very well for a round photo, but we can choose the oval border, and then we can also choose, using this slider, how much we would like to have that fade out the edge of our image. So somewhere around there, I think looks pretty nice. Pretty happy with that. I like to do that because I don't want a hard edge on my actual engraving on the top of this plaque. Now we're going to go back to these options up top here and revisit those for a second. I'm going to convert this to a grayscale because it's a little easier for me to see what it's going to look like in the end, or what it's possibly going to look like in the end once we get done lasering it. And right away, you'll see that the tones in this baby's face are pretty similar across the top. So it may not etch as nice as I would like it to. So let's take a look and see if we can make it a little bit better by using some of these different controls here. So let's change our contrast a bit. We'll start with that. We'll just kind of sneak it up here to a point that we think it looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's change our brightness a bit, maybe to there. And you'll see now we're starting to develop that the light spots on his face are really quite white. Some on his forehead, and the rest of this is kind of a bit, there's more tone going on there, more of a change in grayscale, which I think would look okay in the end. Maybe we'll just turn this up a little bit more and give this a little bit more as well. That looks okay. I'm not too worried about how dark it is right now because I can change that. I can burn over top of it again or etch over top of it to make it darker if I'd like to. So I think, but overall that looks pretty nice. So we'll just click apply, and we're going to go ahead with that and close that down. Let's jump back over to our Toolpaths tab and take a real close look at our laser picture tool. So the first thing we need to do is to choose the appropriate settings for our laser. Now we're going to be cutting this in hardwood, so we're going to go ahead and choose the settings that we've tried and that we think are a good starting point for etching in hardwood. So we'll choose select. And then right now we've chosen our material hardwood. Of course, in our drop-down, we've got lots of other materials here as well. So we have other starting points, if you will. And in this case, we're not going to use our first set of settings because that's just for marking the top of our material, for making like small numbers or small tick marks. In this case, we are going to use our settings for a picture. They vary just slightly because we needed to get a different result. So our kerf is set slightly different along with our power, our move speed, and then our maximum burn rate, which is set so that we get the proper, or at least a really close representation of what we expect in our material in our 3D toolpath preview in our software. If you need more information on how to set one of these up, in the video again for the V-square or the carpenter square, we go over this in depth and you can get some good pointers on how you should set these up. So we're going to select this. Now, of course, we can temporarily edit these settings for our laser in this material if we would like to. These only affect this toolpath, but for now, we're going to leave them right where they are. And also, I've got these three sort of quick settings that I can change here on the fly if I would like to, but they're good just as they are right now. So let's have a look over these strategy settings that we have here. So the first one on our list is called Raster. Now, Raster, it will generate a single set of parallel lines or stripes across your selected image. And with that selected, I can choose how dense I want those lines to be and also the angle that I like them to be at. I can also choose Dither. With the option unchecked, the laser power will be changed evenly in response to the lighter and darker areas of my image. And we'll get a really nice tonal burn of our image into our material. Now, for some materials, it doesn't work very well. So you might want to try to use the dithering, which will produce or generate a tonal range using only black dot patterns of different densities. It's kind of like a newspaper print would look like in the end. And this, for some materials, is a better option to choose. And you'll have to try that and decide which is the better result. So we'll take a look at those in a minute as we go. So if we choose raster, we can change the density of our lines. We can change our angles like I had mentioned. We have our safe C that comes from our material setup that we initially set up originally. We can change the name of this toolpath if we'd like. And also, if we wanted to, we could save the toolpath out once we've calculated it right from this form. If we want to, we can get it to amend the toolpath name with the side of the project, but because we only have one side, that really isn't important for this particular job. Or we can output directly to the machine using vTransfer if our CNC machine has that capability. And of course, we can save our toolpath. But for right now, we're going to use these general settings, and we're going to call this picture, and we're going to calculate our toolpaths. Now you'll see that I didn't have a bitmap selected, so we're going to click OK. I'll select the bitmap, and then we'll click calculate, and off we go. And there we have our toolpath. Now if we zoom in really, really tight into here, you'll see that there are our horizontal lines that we have, our parallel lines that we have set up because I didn't have any angle in there. They're horizontal for our toolpath. And that looks pretty neat. You can kind of see the baby's face there right now. We can preview our visible toolpath and we'll see what we get. And that looks pretty nice. But we're going to try some of the other options. Let's just reset that preview. And let's go back into that again. Let's turn on our dither. We're going to use the same raster as we did. That way we can compare the two and we'll calculate that. And you'll see that we have the dithered appearance and we can preview that toolpath. I think that'll still look pretty nice in this material. Let's go back. Oh, first of all, let's reset that preview and go back here again. Let's take a look at the hatch. We'll turn off dither and we'll recalculate that. You'll see we'll get a grid type pattern from this particular strategy. This will give us a nice dense and maybe even potentially a darker image. There we go. If we zoom in, you'll see that these are actual squares instead. Zoom back out again and we'll preview that toolpath. It does come in quite a bit darker than just the raster version. That's closed. So reset that preview and let's close that down. Go back into our toolpath again. Let's try the dithered option for this one. We'll calculate that. Preview that visible toolpath. It still looks pretty nice, I think. Reset our preview and let's go back in there again. And we'll change we'll take a look at our last option here, which is selected vector. So if we choose that, what this is going to allow us to do is to use a selected set of vectors as our pattern for our burning or our etching. But to do that, we need to have a set of vectors. We don't have that yet. So let's go back to our 2D view for a second and let's have a peek at that. So we're going to choose this circle and we can use our vector texture tool here to create a vector texture inside of that closed vector. And we're not going to mess around with these too much, but there's another great tutorial in amongst all the other tutorials that'll teach you all about the vector texture tool. And if we can, we'll put that in our related videos below. But for right now, we're going to stay at an angle of 0. We're going to use a maximum spacing of our lines to 0.03 of an inch. We are going to leave our amplitude at 0.5 and our wavelength at 2.5. We're not going to add any noise to that, and we're just going to preview that. And I've also told it that I want to place these vectors on their own new layer once I'm happy with them, or click OK. So right now, let's just zoom in a little bit, and you'll see we have these wavy lines. Now we can change our maximum spacing if we'd like to and re-preview that. And you'll see that they can get tighter and tighter together if we'd like to. The variation here is changing, so it's getting a little bit different. You see the variations here. We can turn this up to be 0.05, preview that, and you'll see that we're getting more space between those if we'd like to. I'm going to leave it at 0.03 and turn down the variation. We can change the amplitude, which is the waveform that's going on here, so we can preview that. We can make them a little more wavy if we'd like to, or a little less. It's up to us, whatever you think looks best. But I'm going to leave that at 0.5. And of course, the wavelength we can change. We make them longer or shorter. I'll preview that. We'll leave it there. That's fine, just like that. We can add some noise to it if we'd like to, but I'm not going to add any noise to that. And that does exactly what it says. It just kind of makes those lines a little bit more noisy looking. We're going to turn that off. Hit preview, and we're going to select OK. Let's go back to our Toolpaths tab. And to do this, we need to first of all select the bitmap. So we're going to zoom in a little bit so we can get between these lines. And holding down my Shift key, I'm going to select my bitmap. And I want to select my vectors. I'm going to zoom back out again. And then we're going to go down and hit Calculate. And we'll preview our visible toolpath. And you'll see that if we zoom in on that, you can see that we're etching our image along those vectors that we have. So we get these sort of waves opposed to having straight lines, which is kind of a neat effect. If we wanted to see what it looked like if you ran that toolpath twice, we can just preview selected toolpath again, and you'll see that it'll get slightly darker again. And that looks kind of neat. And for a lot of different images, you can get very creative with this, like having stars that kind of radiate out and hearts that radiate out. That would look really kind of neat. But for this particular image, I think I'm going to reset my preview, go back into my toolpath. I'm going to go back to hatch, and I'm going to leave it undithered, and we're going to calculate that. And then we'll preview our tooling when that's all done. And I'm really quite happy with that. I think that looks really good. Great, let's close that down. Now for the next parts of our plaque, we're going to need to use some traditional tooling. So we're going to go ahead and use our molding toolpath next to create the molding here on the edge of this. So to do that, we're going to select this vector, hold down my Shift key, and grab this profile that I've already set up, along with I've added to it this little bottom leg, which is important, and I'll explain that in a minute. And we'll go ahead and use our molding toolpath. Now again, there's a great video in our support material all about molding toolpaths. So if you want some more information about this, I would highly suggest you go and watch that video. For right now, we're going to start at the top of our material. Our molding is going to go from there down, and then we're going to have a 0.15 inch of a gap on the bottom. First of all, we are going to do our finishing pass of our molding toolpath with a 1/4 inch ball nose end mill. We're going to vary our step over, and we're going to make sure that we skip the flat regions, because we're going to get those here when we use our large clearance tool, which we're going to use with a 1/4 inch end mill. We're going to leave a little bit of material behind so that we can remove that with our finishing pass. We're not going to create sharp corners. And because I've added that little leg at the bottom, I'm not going to worry about this boundary offset. We're going to leave it just at 0, and we're not going to create a automatic one. And we'll just call this molding. And we'll calculate that. We'll preview that visible toolpath. Now you'll see that we get 2 toolpaths. One is the clearing toolpath, and one is the molding, so the roughing and then the finishing. And that looks pretty neat. I'm pretty happy with that. Let's close that down. Let's pop back over to our drawing tab again, and then to our 2D view, and let's look at editing that text that we have. So I can select that text, and we'll go in and we'll edit that. And I'm going to change my first and last name. The first name will be William. The next one will be Stone. Then we'll close that down, and then we'll go and do the same with our month, day, and year. So we'll put in here June. The day would be the 18th. And we're going to put in 2020. And we'll go, okay, that's great. We'll close that down. Then we'll flip back over to our Toolpaths tab. Now we could use the feature here, laser cut and fill with these if we wanted to, but in my case, I'm actually going to go ahead and VCarve those in there. So we'll select the VCarve toolpath strategy. We're going to have a slight start depth. We're not going to bother with a flat depth. We're going to use a 60-degree, 1/4 inch V-bit for this. We're not going to use a clearance tool. We're not going to worry about anything down here, except we're just going to rename this name and date. And we'll calculate that. And we can preview that visible toolpath. Now for our last toolpath, we just need to run a cutout pass. So let's close this down. Go back to our 2D view for a second, and we'll zoom out a little bit. So this vector right here is what we're going to use for our cutout pass. And this is just an offset of this inside line outwards, the distance from here to the outside of this piece of molding, which is 0.35 of an inch. So we just offsetted that out, and we can use that for that particular purpose. So let's grab that. Let's create a profile toolpath. Let's take a look at our 3D view first of all. We're going to have a start depth of 0. Our cut depth is going to be the thickness of our material. So if we put Z in here and we add to that 0.02 of an inch, we are going to go ahead and use a 1/4 inch end mill for this. It's going to take 6 passes. We're going to cut on the outside of that vector that we have selected. We don't need to do a separate last pass. We're not going to worry about adding tabs in, but you're going to want to choose whatever is safe and appropriate for your hold down method on your machine. We use double-sided tape, so we don't need to worry about that for this particular job. We're not going to add any ramps, leads, order, start, at, or corners. None of that is important for this particular job. We're not going to project it onto our 3D model, and we're just going to give it a new name. We'll call it cutout. We can click calculate. It's just going to warn us that we're going to cut through our material, and that's okay. So we'll click that. We'll preview our visible toolpaths, and we'll double click on our waste material, and that's what we're going to have in the end. And I think that looks pretty nice. And that's a pretty easy to edit layout. You can put whatever picture you want in the middle. You can add whatever kind of text you would like. And I think that is a great little keepsake for a new little one.